We are only focusing on this giraffe. If you guys want to draw a different giraffe in there, great. Let's just focus on our ability to use washes and dry on dry to help us build our shadows. But since we're working with such a light color, you're definitely going to want to kind of like fade out your pencil line so your pencil line doesn't peep through your yellow. Because with watercolor, watercolor absorbs the graphite in your pencil and it will turn your yellow a grayish color. So just lighten up your line a little bit. You don't have to erase it completely, you just want it a little bit lighter. If you kind of have like a golden or a yellow kind of goldish color, you can kind of cheat using that. I am trying to get rid of my old paint, so I'm going to use a bright kind of sunshiny yellow, and then I'm going to use dots of brown to help turn it into a gold. So just heads up on that. If you have something that works better for you, then go for it. I'm just explaining why mine's going to be a little vibrant for a giraffe's body. We're going to get a small brush and make it towel dry damp. And we're going to do that outline that we did with our elephant. So towel dry damp, lots and lots of paint, maybe sing happy birthday a few times, and outline. See some of my pencil lines peeking through? You see that? That's why I had you kind of erase your pencil line a little bit. But you guys need to be able to see what I'm doing, so I didn't really erase mine the greatest. And I would work with a large flat next. Also get that towel dry damp and drag it in. This will help you get that controlled color. If you need to do like a dot of paint on your brush, that's okay. You literally repeat this process throughout the entire body of your giraffe. Super simple. This is a controlled way to fill in a large shape quickly, effectively, without allowing very much room for mistake. It's super controlled. That's why we did the outline. Now, if I don't want my giraffe to be as bright as this, so I'm literally going to add, while my paint's still wet, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to add little dots of brown. This is called blending. This is how you get that gold color. If you're using a goldish kind of yellowish brown color already, kind of like this, then you don't need to do this part. But this is literally me working with what I have. See how it's starting to change into like a softer yellow, kind of like a more of like a golden yellow. I'm doing that by adding tiny little dots of paint. Don't go too overboard if you're adding a darker color. You want to slowly build it. Now right here I kind of have a shadow. See how this is kind of like golden brown and this is like more of a white? So while my paint is still wet, I'm just going to sketch in, using my paintbrush, little lines of brown, and then I'm going to blend it together. So I'm using the tips of my brush to draw these lines and the flat or side of my brush to blend them. And that's how you're going to get your shadow. Alright, I have my shadow. I'm going to take a break. You see these little dots? These are pieces of my paper coming up. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to move over. And I'm going to keep moving over here. Do not add your spots until your first layer, this is called your first layer, your filler shade, until this is dry. Yeah, definitely don't want to add dark color to a wet surface. It's just going to spread everywhere. You can draw those spots in using oil pastel if you want to, but it's just a lot harder to shade with oil pastel. So that's up to you. If you don't mind the cartoony look, this is a controlled way to get your spots in. Totally up to you. And remember, your spots do not have to be like your teacher's. All giraffes have their own spots, kind of like all humans have their own fingerprints. So if you want to use oil pastel, you can. Before we end today, I'm just going to show you how to do one spot with watercolor. For dark spots, you're going to have more paint. So I'm going to put my dark spot here. Here's my dark spot. Some of these are outlined. Now, the reason why I like the watercolor is if you add water to your paintbrush, let's say you kind of thin out your paint, you can get those lighter spots. See how this is a lot lighter than your oil pastel? The oil pastel is definitely a lot easier. But since we're focusing on realism today, you can add these light spots in with your brush. And when they're dry, you can add a little bit more darkness. Like this one's pretty much dry. And that's how you kind of get like shadows in your spots. Totally up to you guys though. Your art, your choice. See how I'm adding the shadow in there? Now it's time to paint the Aussie cones on your giraffe's head. You're going to do this using a dragon pull technique. Let's take a damp brush, a brush that's not really wet and it's not really dry. It's damp, like towel dry damp. Pick up a lot of paint with that and outline your Aussie cones. This bold outline is going to serve as a coloring tool for you to do a controlled wash. Once you're done outlining, let's switch to a damp, clean, flat with no paint on it whatsoever to drag that color in towards the horn or the Aussie cone. This will make it nice and tan and help dilute the color and control the amount of water that you're using to prevent risking of spillage. Next, you're going to want to use a damp brush with some brown on it to outline the shadowy features of your giraffe's muzzle to help that muzzle pop. You see how I'm using very little paint here. It's very controlled. Gonna add a little bit of shadow here. You can always add a tiny bit of brown on your edges, but you don't have to go overboard. You can always thin out that brown and then add more as you go. That's kind of what I'm doing here. At least tempting. Now that my paper is dry, you can just dab a little dots of brown in several different areas. Just do your best. Just slowly add to it. The goal here is to dilute that brown with a thin layer of water so you don't have those hard edges, and that your paint starts coming together slowly but surely. During this part of the tutorial, I will teach you exactly how to add more detail to your giraffe's horns and your giraffe's face. Now remember, I am going to add a little bit more water if I want my brown to be lighter, or if I want to kind of thin out a bold outline and spread it into the face. I'm going to use a controlled amount of water in this instance, or when I'm doing this. Now if I want more color and I want a more vibrant, dark, opaque brown, like a brown where you cannot see through, I am going to have less water and more paint. It's always best to start small and build your way up. Just keep that in mind as I'm going through this tutorial. Now here I'm using thin layers of dark brown to add contrast to the muzzle and to the sides of my giraffe's face to help give my giraffe a more three-dimensional kind of aspect or view here. This is something that you can do around your spots as well to make those spots pop against your giraffe's body. Now when you're doing this, you want to keep in mind, where is your light source? My light source is coming from probably the top right hand corner, because you can see that that side of the giraffe's face is the lightest. Now as you're adding little bits of shadow here and there, whatever's medium or kind of in the medium between darkness and light is going to kind of get a medium shadow. It's only going to get a few dots of brown in there, and you're going to use your flat to kind of, spread and dilute that brown out so it's a nice and soft tan color. Now the spots that are the places that are furthest away from the light source are going to get the more highly defined shadowy parts. In this case, you're going to add more brown and less water. You're going to want to make sure that you have a decently dry brush when working in these areas to prevent over spillage of your paint.